The world did not pause for her silence. It never had. But on that bright December morning, under a sky washed in pale winter blue, Mara Ellingson felt that silence press harder than usual, tightening around her chest with every heartbeat. The small outdoor Christmas cafe courtyard bustled with families, couples, and soft, cheerful music that she could only feel, not hear. She sat alone at a round table decorated with holly leaves and silver ribbons, staring at the empty seat across from her. The blind date she had been told to expect had already passed her by without even realizing who she was. Or maybe he had realized and chosen to keep walking. Nothing stung like watching him approach, glance at her profile photo on his phone, then look directly at her before turning away as if she was an inconvenience wrapped in festive colors. Mara tried to disguise the tremor in her hands as she picked up her warm cocoa. It didn't work. In that moment, her isolation felt heavier than ever. If you believe in second chances and stories that restore hope, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindora Life. Your support helps more stories like this reach someone who might need them. Mara sat still as families brushed by, children laughing, adults talking over one another. The hum of daytime activity alive in every direction. She couldn't hear any of it, only see emotions sliding across faces like flickers of lightning. Some days that was enough, but not today. Not after her friend Raina had spent a week persuading her to try this blind date, promising that maybe someone out there was kind enough to see her heart before her silence. Mara had dared to hope. She had dressed carefully, brushing out her chestnut hair, placing a soft cream scarf around her neck, choosing a sky-blue coat that made her brown eyes shine. She had wanted to look like possibility. Instead, she felt like disappointment. For years, Mara had convinced herself that being deaf wasn't a barrier to connection. She communicated fluently in sign, understood lip movements, and lived independently. But hope was fragile, and rejection had a cruel way of cracking it open. Her teenage years had been a maze of classmates who assumed she was slow, employers who treated her like a burden, and strangers who shouted when she told them she could not hear. She could handle these everyday frictions. She had built resilience for them. But this silent rejection on a Christmas blind date cut deeper. It reminded her of everything she feared she was missing: companionship, being understood, belonging somewhere, instead of always looking in from the outside. As she traced her finger absently along the wooden edge of the cafe table, she tried to swallow the rising ache in her throat. The crisp daytime air brushed her cheeks, carrying scents of cinnamon pastries and fresh pine. Bells jingled somewhere near the street. She saw the movement but felt no sound. A group of carolers passed by, singing with bright faces and gloved hands holding sheet music. People clapped. Mara watched, but the moment didn't reach her. She felt like a ghost sitting in the sunlight. She thought of leaving, but something inside her hesitated. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe the warmth of the cocoa grounding her hands. Maybe the last flicker of optimism refusing to be smothered. So she waited even though she knew no one was coming. The cold wooden seat pressed into her back as she breathed slowly, trying to steady herself. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw movement. Two identical little girls in matching red coats walking toward her. They looked around 7 years old, with dark curly hair tied into neat ponytails and soft brown eyes full of curiosity. Their small boots tapped lightly on the stone pavement, though Mara heard none of it. She blinked, surprised. She didn't know them. She scanned the cafe patio, searching for a parent who might appear and pull them away. But the girls didn't seem lost. They walked with purpose, stopping right beside her table. Both children smiled, hesitated, exchanged a glance, and then lifted their hands to sign. "Can we join you?" Mara froze, her breath caught like a hitch in her chest. The girls' signs were a little clumsy but unmistakable. They were addressing her, not staring at her hearing aids, not tiptoeing around communication, not pulling out a phone to type a message, just signing as naturally as breathing. Something warm and bright cracked through the cloud sitting over Mara's heart. She nodded slowly and gestured to the empty chairs. The girls sat immediately, giggling silently. Mara could see it in the way their shoulders bounced. Their hands moved again, introducing themselves as Tessa and Lyra, twin sisters who had seen her sitting alone and wanted to keep her company. They explained that they learned sign because their uncle was deaf, and they loved surprising people who used it. As they signed, Mara felt an unexpected wave of emotion building in her throat. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed connection until it appeared in the shape of two bubbly children with two big coats and matching smiles. She tried to thank them, signing with gentle movements, but her hands shook enough that the twins immediately softened their expressions and reached across the table, placing tiny gloved fingers over her trembling ones. They smiled again, and the gestures said what words could not: "You're not alone." Before she knew it, the twins were telling her about the gingerbread workshop they were heading to after lunch, how they had convinced their dad to let them wander for a moment because they wanted to look at the ornaments near the cafe entrance. They explained how they loved Christmas decorations, especially the ones with snowflakes that sparkled under daylight. They signed excitedly about their favorite cookies, their school play, even how they once tried to bake cupcakes without measuring anything and ended up with a disaster their mom lovingly named flour soup. Mara laughed silently, her eyes warming, her hands flowing with signs that felt smoother now, easier. Then she felt a shadow shift behind the twins. A man approached, a tall, good-natured-looking father wearing a hunter-green jacket and carrying shopping bags. His face held a mixture of apology and relief. He looked at his daughters, signed a gentle question asking if they were being polite, and leaned down to sign a heartfelt apology to Mara for the surprise interruption. His signing was slower, careful, but thoughtful. Mara shook her head quickly to reassure him. She wanted to tell him how much their presence meant to her, how just a few minutes earlier she had been on the verge of tears from painful rejection, but all she managed was a grateful smile. His eyes softened. He introduced himself as Joran, explaining in signs and soft lip movements that his brother had been deaf since childhood, so sign language was natural in their family home. He added that Tessa and Lyra were drawn to people they sensed needed company, and they had insisted on saying hello. Mara's chest tightened with gratitude. She hadn't expected kindness today. She certainly hadn't expected to be seen. As Joran joined the table, the sunlight shifted overhead, casting soft shadows and illuminating the festive garlands hanging across the courtyard. Mara found herself telling him about the blind date, briefly, simply, without dramatics, just enough to explain why she looked so deflated when the twins appeared. Joran listened with the quiet intensity of someone who truly cared to understand. He never once looked uncomfortable. He didn't pity her, he didn't overcompensate. He simply absorbed her story, nodding thoughtfully, signing occasional supportive comments that felt gentle rather than forced. The twins continued chatting between themselves, occasionally tugging at Mara's sleeve to sign that her coat was pretty or her cocoa smelled delicious, or that she should join them at their gingerbread event because everyone needs more sprinkles in their life. Their innocence smoothed the rough edges of the morning, warming spaces inside Mara she hadn't realized were cold.